are different this time, or are they?
Think about that as we bring in our good friend and ESPN college football insider and analyst and expert and whatever else you want to call him, Brett McMurphy on the Deseret First Credit Union Hotline. Brett, welcome back to BYU Sports Nation.
How are you guys doing today?
Fantastic. We are wondering if everything is different this time or if we're just kind of going back into the abyss of the ever-evolving Big 12 expansion rumors. Are things different this time?
I think they're a little bit different, only because the league asked this consulting firm to provide data to show them if they expanded what it would be worth to the conference. So they're actually going to have, instead of just opinions on what works best for them, they're going to have basically hardcore numbers that will tell them if they add team A and B, it's going to be worth this much to the conference projected. If they add teams B and C, it's going to be worth this much. If they don't expand, they're going to make this much. But even with all that information, several people here in Phoenix told me that, just because the numbers say one thing, it doesn't automatically mean we're going to do expand or not expand based on these numbers. It's just kind of part of the information they're going to use to make a decision, kind of like, picking teams for the NCAA tournament. RPI is one of the items used to pick a team, but there's also the eye test and their last 10 games, all that stuff. So basically this is just one part of the formula, if you will, to make a determination on whether they expand or not. And, keep in mind that the presidents are not here in Phoenix this week. They meet at the end of the month in Dallas. The presidents are the ones that will make the ultimate decision on whether to expand or not. So no matter what you hear coming out of Phoenix from the ADs or the coaches, it's all great, but they're not the ones that make the decision.
The answer may be several things, but in your opinion, what do you believe has pushed the Big 12 closer to making a decision one way or the other?
Well, it started by not making the playoff the first year. When TCU and Baylor got left out, I was actually in one of the college football playoff meetings that year, and it was in Dallas, I believe, and Bob Bowlesby had a meeting with Jeff Long, the chair of the college football playoff selection committee, and basically Jeff Long told Bowlesby that the fact that they did not have a 13th game, or as they call it, a 13th data point, hurt the league, and Bowlesby acted shocked by that, very surprised, and basically at that point was almost resigned to the fact, look, we've got to have a 13th game. We've got to have a conference championship game, or we're going to be at a disadvantage going forward. And he actually backed off that statement when it happened. His ADs, I was told, kind of talked him off the ledge and said, wait, let's think about this before we just go and add a conference championship game. So it's kind of been in their mind since the first year. And then obviously, the pluses and minuses of having a conference championship game, whether you have one or not, then you get into the debate of, well, do you want to have a conference championship game with only 10 teams? It's automatically going to be a rematch from a regular season game since they play everybody. Or do we need to get the 12 teams split up in divisions and do a conference championship game that way?
Brett McMurphy of ESPN with us on BYU Sports Nation. He is at the Big 12 meetings currently happening in Phoenix, Arizona. The research comes back and they say a 4 to 5% better chance of Big 12 making the college football playoff with a 12-team league, an 8-game conference schedule, and a championship game. Does the 4 to 5% chance make that much of a difference?
Well, I don't think it does, but actually what I've been told is that Bowles, from people here, that actually it's like a 10% increase.
Really?
So Bowlesby, I don't know if he just he mistakenly said the 4 to 5%, but I've been told it's a 10% increase. But then, people I've talked to here also have said, okay, so it's a 10% chance increase, but that doesn't guarantee that we're going to get in the playoffs. So what happens if we add 2 teams and we don't make the playoff? Adding 2 teams and having a conference championship does not guarantee the Big 12 is going to be in the college football playoff. And the funny thing is, and people have such short memories, that first year, going into the last week, if Ohio State does not Seal Club Wisconsin by 85 points, and if Florida State does not beat Georgia Tech, and that game went down to the wire, Georgia Tech probably should have won that game. The Big 12 gets in 1 team in the playoff, and maybe if both things don't happen, they get in 2 teams, and then I think the narrative's changed. Then everybody's like, Oklahoma gets in last year, obviously. Then everybody is going to be like, why do we have a conference championship game? We need to be like the Big 12 and not have a conference title game because this hurts our chances to get into the playoff. Of course, that didn't happen. They didn't get in that first year. But it's only been 2 years into this. I'm sure one of your questions is, what would I do if it was my decision? And I would simply wait 2 years. I'd say, look, let's wait 2 years. Let's go through this thing 4 years. And if we make the playoffs 3 out of 4 years, we don't need a conference championship game. We don't need to expand. If we make it 2 out of 4, then we've got a really hard decision what to do. If we make it 1 out of 4, then yes, we absolutely need to do something. But after 2 years, I don't think you can make a decision either way. And for the arguments, I know David Boren, the Oklahoma president, has said, well, if we need to get the 12 because this puts us at a disadvantage. This makes us stronger with 12 teams. I couldn't disagree more because bottom line, the teams that you're going to add, whether it's any team from the American, BYU's name has been mentioned, any of those teams, they've got nowhere else to go. They're not going to get an invite from any other league from today until, 4 years from now. So there's no rush to get these guys. They're not going anywhere. And plus, even if you get the 12 teams, say you add 4 teams and you get to 14, if Texas or Oklahoma get an offer to go to the Pac-12 or to go to the Big Ten or go to the SEC, and they're going to double the revenue they're making in the Big 12, they're gone. I mean, that's the bottom line. They're not going to say, well, no, we're secure here because now we have, 12 members or 14 members. They're going to do what's best for the long-term, future of their school. And if it's jumping to another conference, I think they would do that. I don't think Texas or Oklahoma is going to get that offer, but I think when these grant of right deals start to expire in about 8 or 9 years, I really think we're going to finally see a 16-team conference happen. I think the Big Ten will be the first one to get to 16. If you will, they're going to push the button, and it's going to blow everything up, and then you're going to have the SEC react and get to 16. You're going to have the ACC go to 16, and then you're going to see the Big 12 and Pac-12 kind of see what they can do to get to 16. And I think at that point, everything gets shuffled around, and I think that'll be the last major move for realignment. Even if the Big 12 does decide to go to 12 in the next year or two, I still think the one last musical chairs of this whole thing will be when these grant of rights expire in 8 to 9 years, because that will give these schools the opportunity to make the move and not be penalized financially as much as if they basically now that they're prohibited to do it because of these grant of rights deals are in place.
Follow him at McMurphy at ESPN on the Twitter machine. Brett McMurphy, college football insider, with us on BYU Sports Nation. Now, just to clarify, Brett, because there has been discussions about, well, we need to get to 12 because what if Texas or Oklahoma get picked off and the conference goes to 8, then it might dissolve? I mean, is there any validity to the conversation that if Texas or Oklahoma leaves and there's only 10 teams in the conference, that it would dissipate?
Well, it certainly makes it the conference a lot weaker. And again, let's say they're at 12 and Texas and Oklahoma leave. Then they got to go find 2 more teams. I mean, say they're at 10 and Texas leaves. Then they have to go find 4 more teams. Again, when the grant of rights start to expire and if the Big Ten goes to 16, like I think they will, and I just look at it this way. And again, I don't have any inside information. I want to make that clear that I know this is going to happen. From covering this thing, it just seems that's where we're headed. Once this all got started, it seemed that was the end game with 16 teams. I don't think anybody wants a 16-team conference. It's just 14 teams it's just an unwieldy number, and 16 makes a lot more sense. And these commissioners are smart guys, and they pay people that are smarter than them to figure out these things. And if you know that 10 or 15 years from now, you're going to be at a 16-team conference, do you want to be the league that has the first choice of getting to 16, or do you want to be the last league that has the choices to get to 16? Kind of like if you're playing a pickup game. Do you want to pick the first 2 guys on your team, or do you want to be the conference that says we'll take the 4'7", guy, with wearing 2 left shoes. So I think that's why we're going to do it. So back to your question about should they go ahead and add teams, I don't think it matters. Again, Texas and Oklahoma, if it ever got to a point where they had an offer to go to another league where they would double their revenue and it made sense for them to go, whether there was 12 teams, whether there was 14 teams, whatever in the Big 12, I don't think it would influence their decision, and I don't think it would make the Big 12, any less likely to be picked off by other leagues. Because if, for instance, the Big 10 was interested in a Kansas or the Pac-12 wanted 4 teams to go out west, basically what the Big 12 would have to do would have to find replacements, to keep their conference going. And, the unknown would be where all these, where the Big Ten would look. Certainly with the Big Ten network, they're going to pick schools that are not in their footprint to increase the amount of money they make with the Big Ten networks. And, you guys have heard the various, the usual suspects, teams out of the ACC, teams from the Big 12. The one thing is the Big Ten, the SEC, the revenue for those 2 leagues they're basically pulling away from the other 3 Power 5 leagues. So certainly I would be shocked if the Big Ten ever got somebody to leave the SEC. I don't think anyone would ever leave the SEC voluntarily. I don't think the SEC would ever get anybody out of the Big Ten either. So you kind of look at the other 3 leagues as where the Big Ten and the SEC would kind of pick their 2 teams, and then those 3 other leagues would kind of go get the teams that would best help them, but more importantly, they would help them survive any defections.
Fascinating stuff with Brett McMurphy, who is at the Big 12 meetings in Phoenix, Arizona. Brett, we always appreciate the time. We know you're a busy guy. We wish you safe travels, and we'll be talking to you again soon.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Brett McMurphy on the Deseret First Credit Union Hotline. Deseret First, your values, your time.